Welcome to the WAIR Chats podcast, a series where we dive into conversations surrounding all facets of e-commerce and the people working to make it a more sustainable and productive industry for all. My name is Greg Moore, founding CEO of WAIR, and your host for today's podcast. Jason Richardson, the founding CEO of Bad Birdie, went from producing television ads to running one of the most fun and fashionable golf apparel brands in the world. Join us as he takes us from his moments on Shark Tank to managing a hyper-growth brand while maintaining a brand ethos of fun. Hi there, I'm Greg Moore. I'm the CEO of WAIR, and I've got with me Jason Richardson, who's the founding CEO of Bad Birdie today. Jason, how are you, bud?
Good, man. Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Of course. So normally I would jump in and I'd ask you like how you got into e-commerce, right? Like what got you there? Yeah. But I don't want to do that. I just watched your Shark Tank video for the first time and it was outrageous. Like I friggin' loved it. Can you talk to me about that experience? Like you were just so cool, man. And just going through the whole experience. Like tell me about what you were going through during that.
Yeah, maybe cool on the outside. That's good to hear. But it was probably the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever done in my life. The story that the thing I always remember most is you kind of are in this waiting area before you go out. And I was waiting in there for about 5 minutes with two models that came with me. And I had stuffed paper towels under my armpits because I was sweating so much. And I was like, one of our features on our shirts is moisture wicking. And I'm like, there's no amount of moisture wicking technology that will stop this. Because I was like, I'm going to go on the show and they're just going to be so sweaty. So totally. Luckily it worked out. But yeah, that experience, I mean, I was always a Shark Tank fan and got the privilege to go on it. It was super fun. I practiced so much behind it and they do a really good job, the team there to try to like give you a glimpse of what it's like. And yeah, I practiced a ton. Tons of practice videos, tons of having friends ask me questions. Yeah. I wanted to go unprepared because I've been such a fan of the show. I didn't want to be that person that was like, I don't know. So yeah.
No, dude, it was awesome. I mean, this is the story about the armpits and like this. The forethought for you to do that, I would have never thought about that. And then I'd go out there like these dripping pits, and it just horrible.
Yeah.
Dude, and then at the end of it, when Robert, you're like, "Hey, 5% for the putt." Yeah. And Robert takes you up in that. Has he ever pushed back on that? Have you guys ever had conversations where it's like, dude, I want that 5% back?
No. I think it was all in good fun. Yeah, that's all in good fun. And I think they understand that, it is a TV show at the end of the day. And so it's all they're having a good time. That 5% awesome. Doesn't matter to a guy like a Robert.
Totally.
So
yeah, totally. Yeah. When you after doing that show, like, you hear a lot of success stories about working with people that just know the industry, know the space, like have the connections. Were you really able to lean into that? And do you attribute a lot of kind of the growth that you guys have seen based on those relationships that he's been able to create?
Yeah, I think, working with Robert and team, definitely just a lot of learning for me from a business operational standpoint and, just helping us continue to grow as a company. And, it's always just an always evolution. I'm even trying to think back. That was, 2.5 years ago now, some of those conversation and asks. But yeah, just having someone who's an experienced business person in your corner can help a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. So talk to me a bit about the brand. Like I've obviously seen it. I kind of know the founding story, and then obviously you and I talked when we were getting started together. Yeah. But I'd love to just share with the audience, like, what got you to the point of creation for this brand? And then how did you structure the ethos? Because your brand ethos, like everything's just on point, right? It's like, we're going to have fun and that's in everything that you guys do. So I just love to hear more about that.
It's I love that you say it's all about fun because we've spent a lot of work internally trying to portray that. And I think quick story how the brand got started. I started it as a side hustle after reading the book 4 Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And he talks about creating a company, which I always wanted to create some sort of company that served a really niche audience. And so for me, being a golfer at the time, I played a lot of recreational golf, and me and my buddies were the ones that would play courses where we didn't necessarily have to wear really country club attire, right? So we played a lot of golf just in t-shirts, tank tops sometimes in Los Angeles at these muni tracks, and ended up being like, hey, I should make some shirts that me and my buddies want to wear. and figured out how to do that in a short period of time, with no apparel experience. Spent a lot of time being in LA, asking people, hey, do you know anyone that knows how to make polo shirts? Was able to figure that out. Excuse me. And launched it. And really, it just kind of took off. I think no one had really done what Bad Birdie was in the space, which initially was, something that was bold. It was irreverent. The name was irreverent. The prints were fun. They stood out on the course. And yeah, I love that you think that, what I mentioned at the beginning, just talking about fun, right? Like we've spent a lot of time. I've brought in, people who know a lot more about marketing than I do to kind of help build that foundation and make sure we have the structures set in place so that we can continue to be the most fun brand in golf. So hopefully that gives you a little snapshot.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's funny. I have your site pulled up right now, and I was looking at. I saw that you guys extended into youth, which is super cool because we actually just launched our youth recommendation stuff, our recommendation tool, which is great. So we'll talk about that later. But in the very beginning of it, like again, you have these kids in there that are just having a ton of fun and doing like this crazy stuff. Do you ever go to those photo shoots, and are they different than the regular photo shoots? Like, is it just corralling a bunch of like 5 and 6 year olds together really hard?
Yeah. I have done, we actually did a shoot this week for another project, which was teens. It wasn't the young ones. But yeah, I mean, it's a completely different energy. I didn't get a chance. I did not go on that last one. It was one of my favorite shoots that I was not able to be on, but,
yeah,
I think it's just like, I just know that's one of my favorite projects we did this year. And, just like making them look like they're having a great time and making sure the parents are having a good time too. So
totally. That's great. I'm just assuming there's this like beer and wine and cocktails for the parents and the kids just all hopped up on sugar. Like, don't move too fast.
I think it was like they were giving out like fruit snacks or Capri Suns the whole time, and the kids are just like eating as many snacks as possible.
That's gotta be great. I can just imagine. I've got three little boys, and I could just imagine on something like that would be kind of crazy.
Going crazy. Yeah.
Absolutely. So look, you guys have gone through some pretty ridiculous growth since we've been working with you, and I think that started even slightly before that. So can you talk me through, like, from the business owner's perspective, how have you leaned into that, and then how have you really built the team to capture that growth, and then also to continue to extend it? And just going from the beginning to where you are now is really hard. So I'm just really impressed with that. I'd love to hear more about it.
So one of the things I always, circling back to Shark Tank a little bit, I asked Robert, and the first time I met him after the show, I was like, hey, how big do you think this business can be? And he gave me a number, and he was like, but it ultimately depends on what the market says, right? And so that always stuck out to me. It's like, you could set whatever goal you want, but unless the market wants your product and wants your brand, then there's only so much you can do. You can't force it. So I think with that, just the growth we've seen is just really that product market fit of golf has had a extreme boost of almost steroids because of COVID. Everyone went into golf. People are sold out. Not people, but stores are sold out. It just became a really popular thing. It's like growing more than it's growing more. Golf grew more during COVID than it did when Tiger Woods had his peak in the 90s. I look at a lot of stats like that. So we just rode the wave. And I think, figuring out how to grow the business is really tough. Early days, right? It was easy, right? We're just gonna make more polos, right? We're gonna make fun prints, do that. Now, I'm a guy who liked golf and had a good eye, I think, for some styles that people wanted to buy. Now I'm trying to run an apparel company that I actually don't have an apparel background. So really focusing on surrounding myself with people who understand it. Always be learning is another mentality I have. And then from the always be learning, I mean, I try to connect with as many founders or people in other companies who know what we've done. I always try to remind myself and our team, like, we're not curing cancer. We're building a really fun brand in apparel. And there's tons of replica models we can look at on how to build the structure of the business. What is different for us is what the brand is and how we portray our products and how we create unique products. But end of the day, it's like, you can go walk in a mall and see brands that are way bigger than us. And we just do a little digging to figure out how they kind of built the structures to grow. So that's kind of my little hack I always think about is like, well, what is Nike doing, right? Or what did they do when they were our size? Or what is, so-and-so in the mall doing that has a retail store? So,
right. That's actually really interesting. From my position, we do a lot of the same type of stuff. And one of my favorite hacks is I'll take a brand, let's say that raise is like the next round above us, right? And right when they close that raise, I'll have like a Crunchbase notification sent to me, and I'll go on their LinkedIn profile and I'll basically build out an org chart for their team makeup.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, okay, here's the org chart makeup of this team when they were at this level. And now let me see what they're going to build next. And you go do that same thing in like 6 months. Now all of a sudden you have like this very clear roadmap of how well of what they built. And then you track that against how well they're performing. And you do that with like 5 or 6 different models. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, we can replicate that really easy. That's actually pretty cool.
That's awesome. I had to upgrade to LinkedIn Premium because of the amount of companies I stalked in their org charts. I do the same thing because I'm like, I have no idea. Like I can do the best I can, but like everyone, another thing too is everyone organizes their companies in different ways, kind of surrounding who the talent is in place. So yeah.
No, I think you hit something really, really hot in the head there, which is the way I always like to call it, is like wisdom gained is better than wisdom learned, right? And so at the end of the day, if I can go have a conversation with somebody and learn from their years of experience that's ahead of me, it's just going to ramp my ability to succeed even faster.
Totally.
But no, that's super cool. So when you may mention that you didn't have an apparel background. Did you have an e-commerce background? Is that also new in this whole space?
Everything was new. My background was actually in advertising, and then even deeper within the advertising bucket, I was in film production. So I was a producer for TV commercials. So it's a very niche position in like a Los Angeles or a New York market that I did. Mm-hmm. But I did some research in like Shopify. Shopify's made it so easy to start companies on eComm. And so really that was like, I learned it on the job, right? Like I didn't even know what email marketing was until like maybe 18 months into having Bad Birdie. Like I didn't know you could like set up flows and automate that kind of stuff. I didn't, I learned Facebook ads by like putting like I think I spent like $1,000 our first year just testing. Like I didn't know there was like agencies and people that did all this stuff. Like I just kind of like learned along the way.
Totally. Oh, dude, that's awesome. I think we internally we have this context of throw spaghetti at the wall, which is, it's not a new or unique thing. But like we really force our employees and our executive, like everybody in the company has to throw spaghetti at the wall. It's like, go try new stuff. Otherwise we're just going to keep getting what we get, which is great, but it's not going to lead to like inordinary returns. So I love that. It's like, go ask for some forgiveness, go do something crazy and let me know how it works. It's really cool. So when you were learning all this stuff, just about apparel, about business, about e-commerce, what are some of the things that you found the most challenging? And then how did you go about teaching yourselves to overcome those?
Yeah, I think the challenging thing for us that I've always had a struggle with is inventory. Because to grow a consumer product or an apparel brand specifically, you have to know how much inventory to buy, what colors, styles to buy it in, and what sizes to buy it in. Mm-hmm. And so all of that data determines, what your target is. If you're like, hey, I want to go sell $1 million this year. Well, you have to have $1 million of the perfect inventory to hit that. And the reality is no one has 100% of that perfect inventory, right? Yeah. So you're going to need to buy a little bit more and you need to kind of learn and pivot along the way. So at a small scale, we ran into this situation where it was like, okay, we would sell out and then have no sales, launch, sell out. And that's not a sustainable way to grow the business, but we learned along the way. Now we're getting into this way broader scope of having a merchandiser, having a planner on our team that is actually looking in the weeds on every single thing, being like, based on this data, this is how we buy. This is your size analysis. This is your SKU. Like this is your CC breakdown of how many different colors you're going to offer. So it's definitely just understanding how inventory works. It's like an ongoing learning process that I think as we grow, it's always changing and evolving.
Right. To that end, would you, and there's some balance here, but would you rather run out of inventory, so hit stockouts, or have too much at the end of a season? Like, where's your, and like I said, there's a quantity balance in that, but just from a mental perspective, like what do you optimize for?
I always optimize for sellout. Like I know that most planners in an apparel planner, like they're like, well, that's not possible. Like you always need to buy more inventory. But if we can plan it on a strategic level, right? We're going to buy X product and it's going to have a 10-day sell-through rate or it's going to have a 90-day sell-through rate. And if we can hit that sell-through rate, then it's a win. I think the miss is if you we're going to buy something that has a 30-day sell-through rate and you buy it and it sells out in a day, you have a bunch of missed revenue. But if you overbuy and it takes 60 days to sell 30, then like it's always that balancing act. So yeah, it's a formula that like, I mean, you see some of these streetwear brands, they'll sell out in a day, but it's not a sustainable way to go to business because it's like quick hits and you need to actually build like a strong kind of like baseline replenishment business to keep your business continuing to grow. So
Totally. Yeah. I think we start to see that where if that does happen, I think brand loyalty is great. And for your brand, I'm assuming brand loyalty is amazing just because of what it is. But at the same time, like consumers are very fickle, right? They don't keep their attention very long these days.
yeah.
And it feels like it's actually decreasing as opposed to increasing in a sense.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine like if you hit a sellout wall, it's like, well, let me go figure out what's next. And like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
that one's kind of cool, and go there.
Yeah.
The other thing that I realize and I'm starting to see is like competition, right? Like you kind of prove that there's a market here. And so as you guys continue to grow, I'm assuming that you're starting to get more and more competition in the space. How are you navigating through that right now? Like, what are you looking for to continue to maintain your competitive edge there?
Yeah, I think our biggest competition is ourselves internally, right? I know we have a better team and a better product than all of our competitors. And I think our revenue shows that in the simplest term, right? And I think that competition, when you are ahead of the pack, you get to kind of set where things are going. And I know the struggles that it takes to get to where we're at. And I know it's a really challenging process. And so again, I'm not giving a little bit of indirect answer, but I try to keep our focus really internally on like, how do we continue to grow and evolve, where those brands are just looking at Bad Birdie and trying to copy what we're doing. And to me, I'm like, hey, you can't react to what's coming in a sense, right? Like that's kind of the way it's like, I don't want to get distracted by that, so.
Totally. It's funny. We, in our space, right, with size and fit recommendation, there were some incumbents that were there before us that we're catching up to, which is really fun. But then there's a lot of fast followers behind us. And at first glance, like when you look on the surface, you're like, oh man, like if they move quickly, like maybe they can get there and create something that's pretty cool. And then you start thinking about the 3 years and millions of dollars in R&D you put into the solution. You're like, no way. Like it's just, there's so many things that we've learned by messing up that are on the back end behind the scenes here that nobody actually sees on the front side that are just really, really powerful. And we get to lean into that as a competitive advantage to maintain that edge. So that's awesome. One of the, obviously this is a podcast that we're producing. So I wanted to ask you, like, for size and fit stuff, right? Which is what WAIR is specifically catered towards solving. When we were starting to engage with you guys, what kind of drove you to that? What made you think like, oh, I need to find a solution to solve this problem? Yeah,
I think two things. We can always be better at everything we do. So always this mindset of like, okay, from a size perspective, how do we improve our sizing and make sure that it's fitting our core customer? So just getting insights of like, just back end insights of what WAIR can provide data wise and inform like our fits. But I think the core thing, the immediate thing we wanted to see is like an uplift in conversion rate, because I don't want someone to go on our site and not buy because they don't know what size to buy. And so for having someone be able to go in, answer a couple questions and be like, hey, this is a recommendation, increase conversion rate, decrease returns, basically make our whole e-commerce funnel more efficient, right? Getting down to that last purchase is the hardest part. And we're spending so much money to get there. It's like, if we can make it as seamless as possible, that's the main point. So simplest terms, increase conversion rate, decrease returns, making us more profitable. And then third, having the data to be able to build off in our size blocks.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And then like one of the challenges that we're facing now in particular is that obviously Black Friday, Cyber Monday is coming and people are like starting to lock down their sites and stuff like that. And so one of the bits of conversation that we're having on the sales side of the house is about onboarding, right? So like, oh, this solution, it's complex, so it must take a long time to onboard. If I remember correctly, you guys were ridiculously fast at onboarding. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Can you tell me a bit more about that experience if you remember it? It was a while ago, I know. But
onboarding with you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was just Troy, right? He's awesome, number one. So he was super helpful in that process. We have a lot of vendors internally, and Troy's name's always like, oh yeah, Troy's the man. So shout out to Troy. But I mean, end of the day, implementation, it's just like having a partner that can like provide, hey, here's your list of what to do, handing it over in a clear way, and then we just have to deliver against it. And I think that process was pretty seamless, where it was like, okay, you guys need tech packs, you need these, we need to send us, like, we need to kind of go through this onboarding, let's send it out. And for me, I'm like, every day we don't onboard is just dollars left on the table, right? If we can make a 0.1% difference on conversion rate by using like a WAIR, how much is that per day for us? And then I can like break it out, right? So it's like we had to make a move quickly on it.
I couldn't have said that better myself. And I say this stuff all day long, but no, I mean, it's one of those things where like when we get installed on a site, all of a sudden there's immediate lift. And so it's like, do you not want the additional profits? Like, I don't really understand what's going on here. But I love it that it's, when we work really closely with you, you guys were so fast to work with and just get it up and running, which is great. So cool. No, I appreciate that. And then also you had mentioned that you're starting to use some of the data on the backside. Can you talk me through a little bit of that? Because that's something we're so proud of that we do have brands starting to inform their tech pack, starting to inform their inventory. Like how are you guys using some of that information?
Yeah, I think we use it pretty broadly. I know we've been on calls with your team just to be like, hey, you guys have been we've been on calls with your team where your team's been like, hey, what can we add here? What are those benefits that we can have and see? So I think it's an ongoing just kind of learning and fine tuning process of, even numbers, like even to have the ability to be like, hey, this size gets returned the most, right? Well, that may be an indicator for us to be like, well, this size fit, maybe it's a little bit off market for where it needs to be. And I know you guys have been working through that. I don't know exactly where we are with that with my team. I've kind of handed that off to a lot of our eComm team. Totally. But I do know that, I think just that data, like I'm just learning in order to make these leaps and bounds, it's all about making really small tweaks that help you. It's like little small chisels, right? It's not these big, massive like things once it's installed. So so I don't have the most detail on that.
Yeah, totally. No, that makes sense. I think it's, you got to lean into it. And then from the design teams, the inventory teams, right? If that's not a part of the background for yourself, then your teams are probably using that a bit more aggressively, which is awesome. Yeah. All right. So one of the other questions I had, and I don't know if this affects you guys because you're growing still very quickly, but I was talking with Ramon Vela from Story of a Brand. I was doing a podcast for them the other day. And it was really interesting because we were talking about the difference of the mindset. Like during COVID, everybody in e-commerce had this like growth mindset. It was all about growth, all about growth, all about growth. And then all of a sudden we've kind of gone through this normalization and we're starting to see brands kind of focus a little less on growth and just really more on profitability. It's kind of like, let's hunker down. We don't know what's coming. Let's get through the next several months, figure out the macroeconomic situation, and then hopefully go back to that growth mindset. Are you guys feeling that, or are you a bit insulated with that based on the fact that your product market fit is also for a sport that is growing like crazy?
Yeah, I think there's multiple layers to that. I think we've been a profitable business since year one. So I'm very much like, well, we've always been like always staying profitable in an apparel space. Like that's just how I wanted to grow a business. There's lots of different ways to do it. If I had to start Bad Birdie today from nothing, I don't know if that's the way I would do it, but that's where we're at, and I'm super thankful. So yeah, tons of companies that have raised a lot of money and just had a huge burn, they're having to go back and be like cut staff or do things because they do have to be profitable, which at the end of the day is the point of a business, right? So I think there's just that core business value that's like the goal is to make money. And it depends on the life cycle and where they're at in the business. And then I think there's just the macroeconomic factor of, I think we're in a recession and I don't think we've seen the full extent of it. Companies that are profitable, I would say, are going to be a little bit more guarded to get through that. And I think companies that are very small entry level are going to have a really tough time. And I think companies that are these really big kind of behemoths and have a lot of fat in terms of staffing and processes and red tape, I think they're going to have a tough time. I'm very bullish on the fact that I think we are we started as like a little jet ski. Now we have a small team of, 25 people. We're still a pretty lean team, can be quick, move. Like everyone on our team is doing multiple jobs, right? It's not like someone on our team's like, oh, I only do one thing. Like everyone has cross functions, and that's intentional so that we can weather storms like this because we have to. And I think it's kind of a fun challenge. And all that being said, we're still hitting our revenue goal for the year. So we're still in a spot where we're still growing. Now, have we had to reshift and kind of move and pivot and understand new things? Yeah. Like a year ago, you just put $1 in Facebook and you get X amount out. Now it's like, well, we have 10 different channels we're buying and you're trying different things to kind of be proactive. So yeah.
Totally. That makes a ton of sense. I think, especially even with like iOS 14 and some of the privacy challenges with Facebook, what we're starting to see is like, you can't really diminish your ad spend, right? Because that generally is kind of where your upper funnel starts from. But optimizing that funnel on site and then optimizing your email retargeting and recampaigning on the backside are so critical to brand success these days. So we're starting to see a lot of brands really lean into that as value added differentiators for them.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool, Jason. I just, man, this is an awesome thing. I loved following your journey in particular, and then also your brand's journey. And like I said, when I was prepping for this and I watched your Shark Tank interview, it was awesome, man. I was just cracking up at the end of it about the putts and everything else is going on, and like the coolness that you just went in that with. It's awesome.
It was so lucky that happened. Like everyone's like, "Oh, was that staged?" I'm like, "No, that was literally the first time," and we got so lucky. So it worked out in my favor.
Oh, that's really cool, man. I love it. All right. Well, let me wrap up with another question. So the last one here was had nothing to do with work, but what's your favorite non-work activity and why?
My favorite non-work activity at this stage of life is probably just hanging out with my family. I've gone through this complete shift of, getting married, having a kid, like just spending time. Like I spend a lot of time building a business. And so just making my family a priority is my kind of first go-to thing if I have free time. So yeah. And that brings me the most joy in my life. So
totally. Yeah. I feel the exact same way. So I think at the end of the day, it's like, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine. We were talking about work-life balance. And I was like, it's really what I would call is work-life harmony, not necessarily balance. It's like, there's never going to be a balance there, but there's going to be days that we're working. There's going to be days where we're not. But if you focus on the things that you love and the days where you're not, like all of a sudden you have this harmony. It's just beautiful. And family is a huge piece of that. So that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome, dude. Well, look, man, I like I said, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being on the pod with us, and really excited for Bad Birdie in the future. And we'll keep watching it, man. And I can't wait to wear your shirts next time I play golf.
Thanks, Kate. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.